I have a feeling that would be okay. This is starting recording. Cool.
Because
Okay. So
steampunk is like an early form,
okay, I'm gonna go ahead and kick this off because
and
we're recording now.
you can
So
compress.
this is for me in the future, Thomas. This is a story we're making, and it's based off of if the world of our modern day never got past the social standing of feudalism. That's what I was thinking of.
Background footage.
Okay, so yeah, background footage is Titan playing War Thunder. Anyways, I have a feeling it would be more along the lines of, at first it would be hydraulic, or not hydraulic, at first it would be steampunk, as that would be the most readily viable, as certain households might upgrade, as the kings would probably get hydraulics first, followed by the slightly higher noble houses. And then you have the lower houses might still use steampunk, as that's a readily available thing with backpacks of steam.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Steampunk would be kind of annoying though, because it's got compression rates.
True.
Not compression rate. There's like a delay, because air can be compressed, whereas hydraulic fluid is
Yeah.
like water. It doesn't compress very well.
Yeah. And I have a feeling that would be one of those cases where it's a limited statement, because you might have, actually saying that, you could literally have you could have certain households that have a mixture of steam and hydraulic. Hydraulic is for most basic movement and stuff like that, as steam would be you power up a punch and fire off all the steam at once, and then have to cool down in that kind of situation. I feel like that would be cool, because you'd still have this like cooling effect of, hey, I have only like one punch and maybe like enough water reserve for maybe 2 punches and such. I have enough steam and such. You have to convert all of that, and you'd still have to have you'd still have that. Anyways, so religion. Good lord, this is going to get funny. I have a feeling that it would be, so you have all the religions and more than likely just a giant crusade. Like, giant crusades would still be taking place.
Would it be like?
But it'd be
Would
more
it be like
along,
Christianity type of religion?
so, okay,
Or
so it's more along the lines of there isn't one specific religion. Say, because each nation, or each kingdom would have more likely their own religion, but you'd have certain religions such as like Christianity and other stuff like that, where it's like Muslim and such like that, where they go on certain crusades, but they're not specifically. It's like how it is in normal feudalism, where it's they're not specifically going to war with a nation, they're going to war for a cause. They're not, oh hey, we're going to war for our king. No, it's, we're going to war for the Pope. We're going to war to reclaim this area. There'd probably be a lot of different smaller crusades in a certain quote-unquote holy lands.
In
As
the world, religion would disappear quickly.
True, but
it wouldn't be a very big thing. It would be more minor.
Yeah, but I have a feeling if any of the any superpowers were to have still religion, it'd still have those certain crusades where you might have 2 religions in certain areas, and that would be the crusading areas.
Religion would be like one of those things where it's either really big, like a state religion, or it would be like barely any religion in that country.
Like paganism. Paganism would probably still run rampant, as you have these smaller civilizations that are still inside the kingdoms, but they don't follow certain other religions. I have a feeling that where it's going to be just a mass of different religions, as people say.
America is a hodgepodge of every type of religion.
Oh yeah.
You have like.
It is literally everything.
So I have a feeling that in the West you'd have more Eastern focusing groups as they're closer to Japan and China. In the East you have more like Western power people, as they're more noblemen. And in the middle you have more along the line of the mishmash, as
Europe would be like a mix of stuff.
Nah, Europe would be Europe still. I have a feeling the middle of America would be this mishmash of, you have certain noble houses that are still this traditional samurai, but then you have certain ones that have gone to this more modern samurai feel of kind of.
Oh, going off this match.
But
in America, wouldn't you also have similar things like how there's a monarchy in Europe?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that I'm saying more along the lines of noble houses and fighting styles.
would not feel like America would have monarchy. I feel like the whole point of them separating wouldn't be saying they would have a better king. The whole point of George Washington saying he would not be...
No. You have to remember that by technicality that would never really happen. But there would more than likely be a different cause of why the United States went off. And more than likely it would be the mixture. The way I picture it is that instead of Europe saying, okay, you're part of our nation, France trying to fight over it, I have a feeling it would be more along the lines of Europe and Japan, because they're still in this feudal statement, because of their expanding nation and that kind of stuff. Japan wouldn't really do anything, but they would have certain, probably Japan and China would be sending groups out to try and find more land to get more iron and such. So at a certain point...
Oh yeah, because Japan's iron wasn't historically very good. That's the plane!
Yeah, but I have a feeling that at a certain point, yes, the United States would be their own self, but it'd be more along the lines of, at a certain point, Japan would have jumped off, and instead of going for China, they would have gone for the Americas, got onto the West Coast, and that's where you have... So then you have the West Coast, and that's why there's so many, Japanese dudes there. And the reason being is because they had a fight there. Europe and them had a duel in the middle, that kind of... They had a war, trying to figure out who had America. And then the middle section of Americans said, fuck you guys, we're taking over. And that's why you have East Coast with, like, more traditional Western, medieval time era stuff like that. Then you have Eastern stuff on this side. And then you have the mixture in the middle, where it's the group of noblemen who said, okay, whatever, we're making our own people, we're nominating this dude, we saw some belief or something like this, we think he's king. They'd rally under
fascist democracy.
Not really fascist democracy. Remember, that stuff doesn't exist. We're in feudalism still. Feudalism is social structure. They would still rally under a king. Or
Why'd you put
possibly,
your fire out? Get your ass back here, boy.
It could also possibly be an alliance of different kings and noblemen fighting to keep this area their own instead
Honestly,
of being...
I feel like feudalism would not stay very long.
Well,
feudalism is like the type of social structure that it's either there for a very long time or it's not there for very long at all.
What we're saying is that it's one where feudalism never went away. That is the key difference between our worlds.
So you're talking about like Minecraft, pretty much.
Kind of.
Always in the Stone Age.
Kind of.
No.
No, not Stone Age. They're still in the modern technology, but it's more along the lines of
fiefdoms and big ass castles all over the place.
They never got away from the social structure. All of their technology advanced and all that stuff. It's hypothetical, but still, it's an interesting concept to think of the different historical facts would happen instead of...
That plane's gonna hit the ground.
Because you have all of these... So, wars nowadays are more along the lines of certain social beliefs instead of religious beliefs or territorial beliefs. Because America never takes any territory anymore. And the reason for that is because of their ideology beliefs. Because we believe, we need to bring democracy to everyone. While in this situation, it would be more along the lines of we're fighting over territory to gain monetary rewards, and or to try and take more land, and or for honor to see if we can fight more. It'd be more along the lines of small little bickering between noblemen, them going, fuck you, no, fuck you, okay, I'm going to war with you, and that's how that happened.
And then you have to wait 10 years to build back up your city.
True.
Because everything's like a city-state.
True. It's kind of like city-states. But you also have to remember that certain cities, yes, there will be sieges, but they won't be super long drawn out. It would just be the soldiers and forts. The castles themselves.
It wouldn't be like a 10-year siege.
Yeah, it would more likely be like a 2-month siege where... where internet in that specific area was cut off for each side of them. That's what I see it.
Just to piss each other off, they took out the internet.
Yeah, just to piss each other off, they made sure the internet and that they couldn't talk to each other. That was another thing, is that more than likely if a king were to get wind, hey, they're having a siege, okay, cut the internet off of them both. That case, so that because the king would be like, okay, if they get wind that this dude's doing that, it's just going to snowball, and I don't want that to happen, so they cut off internet.
They're pissing each other off. Let's just punish them both real quick.
Yeah, and it would still be like more short-term because they're more focusing on a specific fort and soldiers instead of civilians and rebellions. Now,
Come on.
that
You're
being
just so
that being said, you can still have rebellions in cities, in walled cities and stuff like that, where those are the like if a minor noble were to rebel and get the civilian population, yes, you'll still have those civilian casualties, but it'd be more along the lines of a walled city and everyone knew what they're getting into. Everyone knew, hey, we're going to be starved, instead of noblemen going to war and then their whole city's besieged and they're like, what's happening? Instead, it's more along the lines of the castle where the nobleman lives is being under siege, and they're like, okay, we know what's going on. We don't have to worry about civilian casualties except for our servants. And those servants would be far because they're more personalized, more servants that have gone with.
Because I need to do this to do my promotion thing.
Do it faster then.
Yeah. Then you have the situation. Okay, so question for y'all. How do you think? So, if we're saying like United States is their own thing, Canada, what would Canada be? Would it be in the United States? Is that one's more? Oh,
Colony of
actually,
the UK.
so Canada, I want to say that Canada would be its own thing, as it would be part of the United States at this point, and it wouldn't be called the United States. More likely, it'd be UK, not United Kingdoms. I feel like it would be called the. What would America be called if it wasn't if it was still in a feudal state? That's a good question.
It'd probably be something along the lines of America.
Yeah, something America, but I have a feeling actually it might not be called America. It might just be called like. I'm trying to think. Anyway, we'll figure that out later. But I have a feeling that like Canada itself would have been embroiled in the War of the Americas. The Spaniards. Oh my word! The southern areas would literally have more Spanish and stuff like that, more conquistadorial ribbons. Oh wait, so it'd be northern United States, which is Canada in that area, and the western continent would be more traditional European-built mechs. As southern area, the southern part of it in the seas there would be more conquistador and Spanish-made stuff, as they're more this. I want to say that the conquistadorial armies would be more. They're more seafaring. Like they have more seafaring things, but they're more lightly armored and more. I'm feeling South would be more exosuits and stuff like that, with only small, mini, maybe 1.5 story mechs, as they're more. Like Mexico and Spanish conquistadors in that case. Like
Conquistadors were the Spanish explorers, right?
Yeah, they're the Spanish noblemen, Spanish adventurers. I have a feeling that the south of America would be that kind of situation where they have more lightly armored mechs, more seafaring mechs, as they were literally the ones traveling from different areas, and that would have been coming from Mexico. Trying to take over some of the Americas and then being pushed back, with some of the noblemen staying there because they founded families there. I could see that happening, where certain noblemen would have gotten killed off, other noblemen moved in and brought their own technology. Saying that, I have a feeling that the South Americas would more along the lines be... How would I say this? They'd be more exosuit based because of how much jungle there is. They would be more maneuverability, more smaller.
It'd probably be,
and they'd probably be like Japan. Yeah,
it would probably be
But they're more like the Dragonaut mech suits from Advanced Warfare, where they're heavy built dudes. They'll have those heavy infantry where they're slightly lighter than normal heavy infantry mechs or exos, but they're lighter because of the muck and all the rainwater and stuff. The exosuits themselves literally have grapple hooks, jet boosters and that stuff to be able to jump around through the trees. It would be more Western technology, but with its own conquistador spin. It would be that kind of situation where more likely Japan would have either swept through. Actually, I could see South America more being like a eastern area, as instead of Spanish. It would be more Spanish and European or not European, West Eastern areas, as they more got took over by Japan, and instead of like it'd be more along the lines of American, like how they rebelled against the two fighting area. Instead, they made their own nation, and more Spanish areas were like that. As you have this southern area meeting up with America, would be this mixture of European and American things, that kind of situation. Uh-oh. I walked outside range. My headphones walked outside range. But, it's kind of like that situation, I don't know, this is a fun topic to think about, because you have all these, like, what-if scenarios, because, like, World War I wouldn't really happen, instead it would more along the lines of just be a tutorial dispute between the two, like, areas, with noble houses going into each place to try and take another nobleman's area. Like, because then you have, like, Asia, and its Indian area. I have a feeling Indians, Africa would more than likely be this, there'd be a lot more run focus. Africa itself would be more along the lines of they're trying to traverse areas as fast as they can to try and get to their enemies. They're more along the lines of the people that are using cavalry and stuff like that, as you have Egypt and them more using this track-based mechs as they're walking along, but also using these tracks to make sure they don't fall in the sand and that stuff. They're not as big, and they're more, how do I say this? Both of them would more likely use tracked vehicles and or bikes and stuff, as that would be their noble house would more than likely be exosuits, being able to be lighter, and it would be more along the lines of like how Japan is with their exosuits, and have their weapon technology be able to cut through mech suits easily. So if they ever want to war with mech suits, they could. But you have all these different spin on them where it's just they look different slightly, but they still have the same technology. I want to say Mongol would still probably be a giant powerhouse, as they were the first ones to unite together, but at the end of Khan's reign, more than likely, they will separate again. They would be the first ones to adopt motorcycles as cavalry and use rifles, like single shot first, and then more than likely they would went to either fast submachine guns that don't do much damage but just pepper you with bullets as you're in a mech suit or an exosuit, stuff like that. And or certain sections of their areas that were specifically meant to take down exos or mechs. Like, I have a feeling that would be Mongol. Then you have China. They would be more along the lines of siege warfare. Yes, they'll have a lot more honor duels, but they have this giant wall that they've upgraded with certain exos that would be walking along them. Instead of being like a tourist attraction more nowadays, it would be this, like, Mongol would always be trying to raid it still. Mongol, more than likely, they would have at certain points.
You almost joined us because of the person left.
I'm not at my computer, I'm walking around talking. I'm fine. Anyways, like, more than likely the Wall of China would have probably gotten better and less, probably still stone, but it would more along the line still have a lot more people on it nowadays. Nowadays, more than likely, they would have these exosuits instead of mech suits. Maybe the mech suits would be behind them being, like, houses themselves for the noblemen. For, like, there might be sections of the wall where certain noblemen live and their cities branch out from that way. Because they've been fighting these Mongols that, yes, they've gone moving around, but I have a feeling that Mongol at certain points would settle down, get certain certain places growing so that they can build more exosuits and stuff like that, and or just steal them from other nations. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Like, I have a feeling China would be more along the lines of still trying to fight off, probably Korea as well. Korea, like, China trying to fight off Korea and, like, Mongols. As Mongols would still this power speed, like, house. They're all about the mechanized, and more likely they would have this certain, either APC or certain like that can always go through like a doorway.
I feel like the Mongols would be very,
cavalry focused.
They would be, Yeah, they would be very cavalry focused in the beginning, but they would then move towards more of like a heavier style of getting around.
True. I have a feeling that there'll still be this fast-moving unit still. Like, probably, more than likely, in my eyes, they would have these APCs that carried their exo units with motorbike
Just
exo.
blast them.
Yeah, true.
Oh my gosh.
But
APCs that just throw the exosuits at the enemy.
true, and that might be certain. That might be like Asia and stuff like that. But I could see Mongol using
Just
that to
rocket
get
powered exosuits just throwing the enemy at them.
throwing the enemy at them. But anyway,
Other way
I
around,
have a
throwing
feeling
the
that
exosuits at the enemy.
I have a feeling that Mongol will more than likely adopt the motorized vehicles first, using them to get around their territory and having their war area fighting like that. But I have a feeling that at a certain point they will be unified and then start getting more APCs and mechs that are still like super fast. The mechs themselves would be this low to the ground as like
Stop inviting me.
No.
how do you say this? They'd be more along the lines of this really light armored mech suit, as they're more along the lines of just like a power lifter from Aliens. They're small, they're nimble, they're meant to go super fast, kind of like Africa, but where Africa is more along the lines of going somewhere from point A to point B.
Go speed.
Yeah, Mongol is more about speed, while Africa is more along long distance. They're meant to travel long distances and like maybe a day or two. They're meant to keep traveling. They're how do you say this? They're more energy focused. They're more I'm thinking of the word. Conservative. They're more of the people that if they're going to be running, that's what they're going to do. Instead of, like, in Mongol's case, it's more along the lines of we're trying to hit our enemy as fast as we can. In Africa's case, it's we want to try and outrun our enemy and or try and bleed their energy away so that we can fight them on one-on-one. With probably certain clans would be more along the lines of we want to go there as fast as we can with this low energy cost, or, well, more than likely high energy cost, but speed. As those would be able to catch up.
Africa would be more endurance focused, while like
Yeah.
the
Mongol.
like the eastern steppes would be more like I want to go there now. I don't
Yeah,
care what
like
happens,
Mongol
even if I fall
specifically.
over from exhaustion.
Yeah, Mongol would specifically be like that, as they are literally. They would be more along the lines of rifle focused, more likely, less sword focused. As the only times they would use sword is if they get too close to an enemy. And that would be more than likely when they try and scale the walls of China every, like, 50 years, maybe 20 years. I have a feeling that might be the case where it's every 20 years they
try and destroy China.
Well, they try and take certain areas of China and or loot the area, trying to take more resources back to their cities.
Trying to take China.
It's like Mortal Engines in that case.
Or it's like moving around.
But they have Russia. Good God,
Russia just throws people at the problem.
I have a feeling Russia really wouldn't. Russia would be kind of like Europe, where it's more along the lines of they're always fighting, but it's more along the lines of they're always fighting this sneaky statement. They're always these.
I feel like
they're always
I feel
fighting.
like they would be
blizzards.
less honorable and more like I'm going to just throw thousands of people.
No, I have a feeling that
in
instead of becoming like a giant nation, more than likely it would become like probably 3 or 4 nations. But it's more along the lines of they're always this stealth region. They're always fighting in snowstorms. They're always dueling, and they're more focused on this like heat sensory. As they've gone into these cold environments, they've tried to. They're more along the lines of survivability. As they might be fighting a few seconds, and then suddenly a snowstorm runs in, and every single man for themselves. Like even if you're a nobleman, if you can't survive the cold, what good is it? What good is the victory to you? Yeah, what good is the victory to you? Like, that's my thing, is that I have a feeling that would be more along the case of Russia would have this European style of armor, but it would be more along the lines of this fur-covered armor, with exosuits being this, like, it would be this, tiny bits of armor, but more fur and more heating elements to keep them alive if, like, snows to come. Because if snow were to come, I have a feeling that Russian forces would immediately, both armies would literally, where they're standing, would literally hunker down to try and wait it out. Like, instead of trying to move and
We can
waste
deal with
energy.
each other later. We just gotta
Yeah,
not die at
like,
the moment.
like that would be one of the truths that everyone in that area would know about is, as soon as a snowstorm hits, every soldier, no matter who you are, is to hunker down and or, like, exosuits would more than likely become these, like, little mobile bases or not, no, mech suits would more than likely become these little mobile bases as they lean down and their heels, like, if they're 2 stories, their heels would more than likely become fireplaces, as that's where their, boilers would be. Like, certain ones would have these boosters in their feet and they would, like, jump down, that's where their hot water would come from. They would be more along the lines of survivability, as they want to use more steam-powered elements in their thing to keep them warm. Like, even if they aren't using steam, maybe they're using coal, keeping themselves warm. And that's where the fire would be more likely. Yeah, and every knight would know that if you were to chop off, if you don't want a nobleman to live, chop off their leg. Chop off their mech's leg. If one of their legs is down, they cannot walk anymore, and if a snowstorm hits and they don't have enough coal, they cannot survive through it. Saying that, if another nobleman of the same, like, elite alliance were to find you doing that, more likely they would specifically, strike down both your arms, and that would be the punishment. Is that you lose both your arms, and now you can't fight.
You are being executed.
No, we're not executed. You more likely just lose both your arms so you could not fight. Now you have to specifically stay with that mech and help him survive. I have a feeling that Russian noblemen would be more along the lines of this kind of jolly people. Like, whenever a snowstorm hits, they're all this jolly, and it's like, oh, hey, come on, guys, come on in. And that kind of situation, but on the battlefield, there would be this ruthless, if you break the honor code, we will literally execute you and leave you in the snowstorm to die.
Okay.
Kind of that situation,
Yeah,
like, as long as everyone follows the
feel-
rule, they're all jolly. They're all this, like, oh, okay, guys, it's a snowstorm, we gotta survive this. But as soon as some shit like that happens, they're excommunicating that person. Like,
that person dies.
yeah, that person is left out of the picture. If they try to come, literally everyone in underneath a mech during a snowstorm, and they see a dude walking away from a literal legless mech, more than likely, if they're seeing a legless mech, they're going to let him in. If they're seeing an armless mech behind him, they're going to pull out the swords and slash him down. Every single one of them. As they know, oh, this dude chopped off another nobleman's leg. Or they killed him via the snow instead of honorably. Like, that's my thing, is that more than likely Russia would be this more honorable people. If you chop off this dude's leg and leave him to die in the frigid cold, you're losing both your arms and you will not be able to go back into society. You either die in the cold or die by blade. Like, that would be Russia. And I have a feeling that the mechs themselves would be more along the lines, I have a feeling there'd be like these longhouses. Like, there'd be...
Oh yeah, like Viking longhouses.
Like, there would be this, like, Viking-looking construction where it's... Like, it's almost like a walking Viking longhouse, but more... I guess more Western technology in it, as you see these little wooden beams in certain sections, and as soon as snowstorm hits, they all know, okay, go into a kneeling stance, as that's their conserving energy mode, and anyone that sees a snowstorm and sees these noblemen, and sees their mech, the mech's eyes will literally glow, and they're, like, it would just be this certain situation where certain mechs will have this glow to them to say, hey, we have warmth come in no matter who you are. And certain mechs will have this one where it's just more along that situation where mechs would have this beacon during snowstorms. And only situations when they're fighting in snowstorms would be, I guess, actually I can't really see Russians fighting during snowstorms.
That's the Russians know not to fight during the snowstorm.
Yeah, like British, if they were to go in there, they would either have to have a noble house that were from Russia, or they would specifically have to make their own I guess it would be called Longhouse. Yeah, the Russian mechs would be called Longhouse. That would be the model type is what they're called.
Longhouses.
Yeah, Longhouse would be the like how you have in Warhammer 40k the different like the Redemptor class, Dreadnought, and stuff like that. In this case, it would be more along the line of the Russian. You have the Russian mech, which is the Longhouse. Then you have the different.
Playing a different game now.
Yeah. Then you have the different.
Really?
Yes.
And then you have the different.
Watch the snow.
I would say that they would be the Longhouse.
Finish the mission.
Then you have the Warden and the. I want to say the Warden would more likely be the most basic, like armored mech from the Western world, as that would be the most basic and readily available mech there is. And the more like king mechs would be literally called Lord mechs, Lord or Lord design, or just called Lords. That would be what they're called. As that would be the king's mech, as the like lords and as lords, or I guess they would be called dukes and duchesses is what they'd be called, and those would be called the. I'm trying to think of a good name that they would be called, because wardens would be minor noble houses. The lord mechs would be literally the king's personal mech, or the personal noble family's mech, and I have a feeling that the. I'm trying to think of the name that would be called. What would be a good name for like a medium, like in between those two?
Like a lord and a what?
So a lord is for the the specific noble family's mech. That would be the lord, the lord mech. Then you have the warden, who are the minor nobilities. They're slightly smaller, probably like 1 or 1.5 story tall. And then, like, Lord mechs would be 2.5 stories tall, as then you have a 2-story mech or a 1.5 story mech.
So
Yeah,
you got
knight
wardens
class.
and a knight.
Yeah, wardens and knights, that's what they'd be called. And those would be the duchies and duchesses and that kind of situation. That would be their mechs. They're not as tall as the king, so you can distinctly pick out who, like, what noble class is which. Even saying that you could have a warden be esteemed to a knight, but not be able to change his height because of it being a family heirloom. And so instead, they gained this prestigious armor that has been adorned, and it's more heavily armored for that mech specifically. And those, I have a feeling that those would be called more along the line. They would be considered knights, but they would be considered warden knights. And that would be the distinguishment would be, oh, that's a warden. Yeah, but he has a lot heavier armor, and you can tell because he has a giant thing on his head. Like, he has this plume, or, like, king crest on his head, and that would be determining if he's a knight warden. And knight mechs can't gain that status, because they're already knighted. That makes sense. Because then you'd have, like, you have the Longhouse mechs, and that would be the general consensus for every Russian mech. But they would have, like, the Longhouse Warden, and that would be the smallest of them. They have the Longhouse Knight. So I'd have to say that the European, their version of them would more than likely be the... So I have a feeling that the UK and like London, that area, would be their own nation, as they're more water focused. They would be more likely the, how to say this, what would be, I guess he's a foul knight, or like, no, that would be called, I'm trying to think of a Latin name for water, yeah, there would be Aquarian knights. And that would distinguish between the different types of them. It's like, hey, there's an Aquarian Knight. Oh yeah, and there's Europe name. Certain knights would be considered holy knights, as they're a different type of knight. You can, like, Longhouse knights, they're from Russia. They're meant to be survivable. They're meant to be this warm house. Then you have, like, Europe Knights, which are this. I'm trying to think of a proper name for them. What? Okay, so you have the Aquarian Knights, which are more along the lines of they're meant to be boats and such like that. They're meant to fight in water and stuff like that. Well, you know what I mean. They're meant to fight in water, stuff like that. What would the like European Knights be called? Because I have a feeling that if Japan ever made mechs, more than likely they would be called Shogun Knights, Shogun Lords, Shogun Wargans. That would be their style. Is that they're like the Shoguns? You can tell which ones are Shoguns because they're the smallest out of the three. Like a Shogun Warden might be just an exosuit that's been armored like a samurai, while the Knight's a slight like a half a story tall, like a single story house tall mech. And then you have the Lord, which is 1.5, but it's this like correctly ordained. And the way you can tell the difference between all of the different types of mechs is just like what size they are, but also what they're meant to do. Aquarian Knights are meant to, or Aquarian designs are meant to be pressurized. They're meant to go underwater. They're this bulky, but they all, instead of this, no, that'd be super armored, but instead of like the normal knights that you see, they would have these water filtration systems and like gills on the neck and stuff like that. They would look more like Aquaman kind of thing. They look more fishy.
Fishy.
They have Shogun Knights, which are just more smaller and faster and meant to be more maneuverable in this rough terrain. I have a feeling that the American Knights would be called the Pioneers. That would be like the Pioneer Knights. That would be their style, and that would be the middle section of America. They're meant to be light. They're the same size as all the other mechs of European design, but they're meant to be able to go through trees.
Like explorers.
Yeah, they're kind of explorers. And then you have like conquistador knights and stuff like that. They're meant to be a mixture of land and water. They're meant to be able, like, they're amphibious, kind of like that. Well, Aqua Knights are specifically meant to stay in water and that kind of stuff. While Conquistador Knights are meant to be able to travel long distance in water, but not be able to fight in water. And then you have a situation where it's Pirate Knights and stuff like that. The only difference between Pirate Lords, Pirate Knights, and Pirate Wardens is that they're just the different sizes. Pirate designs would just be this collaboration of several different mechs, like mech area.
You just
mech
slap
suits.
together like a bunch of. You just slap together like a.
Well, not even that. It's more along the lines of they've just taken different parts and pieces from other knights and lords and all that stuff and put it into a single mech. Like that kind of stuff, like Mad Max kind of. So then you have. I have a feeling that like Egypt and that kind of area would more along the lines be going off of. I have a feeling that they would be called the pharaohs. Like desert designs that were meant to be traveled along desert would be called pharaohs. So you have a pharaoh warden, a pharaoh knight, and a pharaoh lord. That would be the differentiation. Well, Africa would more likely be the I'm trying to think of a name that would be called. Cheetahs? No.
Nah, that's boring.
No. Because Mongol wouldn't really have any mechs. They would just be classified as the different types of different bikes. And you'd have, like... they wouldn't have mechs. That's my thing, is that Mongol wouldn't have really mechs. It would be more mounted. They'd be more mechanized, more that kind of situation. China would more than likely have the each dynasty might have their own small designs, but I have a feeling that they would literally just be called the dynasty style. They're called the dynasties. They're called dynasty knights, dynasty wardens, and that's what specifically they called their design of knights. Europe themselves, I have a feeling, would just keep... I have a feeling that they would be more along the lines of the... Like, you have the holy area, but they wouldn't, like, that would be specific knights and stuff that have been ordained by holy like holy priests and such.
Yeah.
Like those would be another league entirely. That's literally just, that's for crusading. That's for going into certain regions and crusading. But even then, as Shadow stated, that might not be a thing anymore just because of how everything got separated and how America became a thing. Because maybe America has crusades to where the first settlers like landed. That might be their crusade. And if anyone wants to continue, they travel along and then say, hey guys, we're traveling to the Holy Lands. Like, that could still be a pilgrimage, and it could be one of those things where certain holy sites are not commanded by areas or by kings and such. It's more along the lines of they're commanded by certain religions. Maybe there's one specific religion that is literally strewn about the area, and that's what they have, is just these small temples and such. Maybe that would be a thing, like, that kind of thing. Because you have, in Japan, where they had the battle monks, that would be kind of the situation where you have everywhere else, is that holy knights would specifically be the, like, or holy warden, like, the holy design of mechs would be the guardians of certain religious sites in certain churches. Like, churches would more likely have the holy warden that would be, it would be a mech that would be sitting in front of a church or at the back of the church. Whenever the church is threatened, the selected pilot of that thing, maybe he's called a pope, maybe he's called the Holy Knight.
The Pope is now a pilot.
I have a feeling the Pope itself would have the Lord mech. That would be his specific mech. But he would
the
only.
Pope is now the pilot.
He's
now a pilot.
He would be a pilot, but he would only use that. More likely, the Holy Knights would be more. They aren't meant for warfare. They're more meant for looking intimidating and or just looking ceremonial. As the Pope would more than likely walk around in his mech, and it might be smaller than like other mechs. It might be like a shogun, where it's the holy warden armor is more along the lines of an exosuit. It's a holy exosuit.
It's like an enhancement.
Yeah, like actually, I could see that the holy wardens would literally be like the
instead of being like a suit you put on, it's like a.
It's an armor
like an enhancement.
No, it's more along the lines of the holy wardens would be like the Knights Templar. They're just guardians of churches. They're guardians of holy sites. That is what they wear all the time. They're meant to be there and specifically be there. Holy Knights would specifically be certain people in the Knights Templar that would be there. That's what they would be called, the Templars. That's what the Templar Knights. That's what the design of the Europeans would call themselves, is Templars. That would be what they call their like designs. Instead of being the Holy Knights, they would be called the Templars. Because of the situation of them just being almost exactly like the Holy Knights, but just bigger.
I feel like we're just pulling from like 40k in like every game we know of just to make this.
Dude, that's kind of how this situation works. That how these what if scenarios happen are mostly from games and other resources that you find. But saying that, Africans, I have the African Knight. I have a feeling that they would be like the Holy Knight system in the lines of, they would be the smaller like Shogun Knights, but they would be the Zorian Knights. That would be what they're called, the Zorians. Because they're meant to be, no, it's not Zorian, that's not the name of the tribe. Dang, I'm trying to think of the certain tribe that was most historical in Africa that fought Europe. I know it started with a Z, I can't remember what they were called, but it would be that tribe's name would be what...
Zambian?
No, I can't remember the name, but that's what their mechs would be called, or at least their equivalent to their mechs. And there would be more along the lines of long distance and such like that. What are we forgetting anywhere? So you have the pioneers, you have the shoguns, you have the Templars, which is Europe, then you have the Aqua Knights, which are from the area, like seaports and noblemen that hold sea areas. And more likely, Aqua Knights would be their own warfare. Like any any nobleman that holds a port would have a Templar, like say they're in Europe, they'd have a Templar style knight as well as a I guess that's what they would be called, aquamarines. Yeah. Like there would be a totally no, actually no. Instead of like Aqua Knights, it would literally just be considered the like Marines. That's what they would be called. Like Marine style, like Templar Marines. Those would be Marine, like they're meant to be water mechs. They're the Templar design. They're just considered water-faring mechs, and certain, like, each port would have their own mech that specifically was meant to be their sea defense mech, with certain, like, other mechs being able to do that. No, never mind. No, they would be called Aquas. Yeah, Aqua Knights. That
This
would be
is
what they're
going.
called. Yeah.
Just going back and forth.
Yeah, no, I just thought about it. No, I was right the first time. It would be Aqua Knights, and each noble house that had, like, how to say this? I guess sea warfare would be very, very different than what it is now, where instead, like, you would have more along the lines of these, like, almost, like, how we have land warfare and the Knights our system has. It would be that kind of situation, but they're fighting either on top of the water and in the water. It would be more along the lines of having 0G fighting, kind of that situation. And that's why they would be considered.
Okay.
That's why they're considered aqua designs. Is because they're meant to be underwater, and then you have the different noblemen that have, like the different types of noblemen that have an aquamarine, or not aquamarine, aqua knight, or stuff like that. Yeah, they have like the pioneers and stuff like that. I'm trying to think. Missing anything? So we talked about the knight system. What do you think the like exosuits would be called? Just footmen?
Probably just suits.
I have a feeling that they would just be called like footmen. The person wearing an exo would be called a footman. The armor itself would be called...
Oh, the person wearing it.
Yeah, like the person, the specific pilots... Like exosuits...
They'd probably just be referred to as, like, suits, though. Like, just people wearing them.
No, I have a feeling that the specific thing they're wearing would more than likely be considered, So, like, you have the pioneer footman. Yeah, that's what it'd be called. Would you have... Oh, so you're wearing a pioneer footman suit, right? Yeah. It's meant for traveling hills and mountain stuff like that. So, the Shogun, like, the Shogun Warden would just be more along the lines of, like, the armored, more along the lines of an armored version of that. Well, the footmen... Saying that, actually, most of the Shoguns would more than likely just be, Shogun Wardens, good lord. As more based off what Japan is like, I would say that there'd be a lot more Lord Shoguns made because of how smaller they are and how much more cheaper they are and how more warlords there are in the area. If that makes sense. Like, Japan would have a lot more warlords, but or a lot more like lord style shoguns, but they're smaller considered to like Templars. That's why there's so many of them. Well, you have the like knight shoguns and other shogun styles are more abundant in Japan because of just the smaller scale of warfare there. As back then, most houses themselves were like soldiers, and maybe even their like basic soldier would be considered samurais instead of like shogun samurais. That was what they'd be considered instead of like Templar or pioneer footmen. Like that might be what they're called, and even then, maybe like pioneered footmen would have two different distinguished like styles of exos. One more for endurance, and one more for traversal. And one's considered a footman style, which is more for the mountainous terrains in the area, and samurai style, which is more for the tree area. And they more have jet boosters and stuff like that, with slightly heavier armor than a footman. While footmen are meant to be jumping off rocks and stuff like that, and the samurai style is meant to traverse trees and bounce around. They have more compression in their feet, both of them do, but one more has a jetpack and one more has just compractional feet and that kind of situation. Like, Pilgrim would probably be the biggest. There'd be a lot more different styles, I guess you call, because you have Japan and Europe being there as well. So the exosuits themselves, they might take a design from the Shogun, like the Shogun Samurai, and they might just go, okay, we're going to call this the Pilgrim Samurai because of the similarities between the two, like between the two styles, and this one's going to be called a footman, as the footman's more likely the most basic. The footman's probably the most basic. Maybe the samurai is meant for more swordsmen. I don't know. I have a feeling that, like, the samurai version, like the pioneer samurai might be more along the lines of the tree traversal. They're the pathfinders for the pilgrim people, or the pilgrim style. As the foot soldiers literally meant to be foot soldiers. They're meant to be able to be good in any terrain, while specifically samurai suits are meant to be able to be faster than the footmen. They have jet boosters, they are meant to go fast. Well, in saying that, footmen and samurai exosuits can be interchangeable and or modular, as the only difference between the two would be probably a jetpack or some sort of jet boosters. So say you have a footman and they have to be specialized to be able to travel into like certain terrains. Maybe they've been upgraded to samurai, to like a samurai style of them being given a jetpack to be able to traverse up a cliff and fight someone up there. And that would be the situation where every suit there would be considered a samurai. Or at least some of them are, and maybe you have a certain section that's meant to be going up the cliff faster, while footmen have a more along the lines of better grip on rocks. They have this hand grip, and they're able to climb up rocks, while samurais are meant to boost up, slash down at footman style exos, and keep going. They're meant to be faster, while footmen are meant to be slightly heavier armored than maybe the samurai style. Maybe the samurai style is just the bare bones of a jetpack, and the footman style has a little bit of armor instead of a jetpack. Like, that could be a modular system. I don't know. Any ideas?
That seems pretty good and well fleshed out, and I was definitely paying attention. Wasn't at all blowing people up and using miniguns as boosters.
Fair enough. You say that might be like a specialized mech suit that's literally just meant for
please don't. I meant that as a joke. Don't use miniguns as boosters.
Nah, I have a feeling if anyone were to do that, more likely it would just be a show of concept, and everyone would be like, "That's a horrible idea."
Yeah, that's an amazing idea. Be quiet, Moon.
I guess the whole consensus on air mechs would be more along the lines of just an aircraft. Like, ace pilots would still be a thing. Like, I have a feeling aircraft wouldn't really be much of a thing unless specifically, I don't know. It'd be more along the lines of like airships. I have a feeling. Each, like, you have a Templar airship, you have a holy airship, and like holy airships are literally just traveling churches. They're not meant to be shot down, they're not meant to be taking battle, but if they do, they have these ornamental cannons that are meant to be used, but rarely ever. Then you have like the different, like Shogun airships might be smaller, more like speeders, like more like planes and the such, where it's more like a bomber, meant to carry your maybe they're slightly bigger than a bomber, meant to carry the Shogun Lord style mechs and that stuff. And that would be the air system, would be more along the lines of airships, where they're able to carry, like, say you have a Pilgrim style airship and it's meant to be, like, that's what they're called, Pilgrim airships. And they're specifically meant to be a wide variety, like, they're meant to be a exploration airship. And maybe if you're willing to go with it, maybe with this system, or maybe a cataclysm happens in our world during this, and that's why Pilgrim's situation is probably better for it. Or maybe it's along the lines of more land started growing up and land started shrinking, that's why you have this constant fighting. Or airship fighting. I don't know. I have a feeling that airships would be coming into the system at some point, but they would be, like, temple airships were meant to be specifically just carry people. Pilgrims were meant to be able to be long range, as well as just carry a lot of exploration units. Conquistadors are meant to just get people from point A to point B. I feel like the African mechs or airships wouldn't really do anything. Mongols wouldn't really use airships, cause
Yeah.
they wouldn't really use airships. If anything, they'd probably use land ships, like more likely just APCs that are fitted out to carry bikes would be their situation. I can
It's
totally
just a
see them
big ass
using
trailer
Exos.
towed by a truck.
Like Mad Max, kind of.
No,
No, I have a
they
feeling...
actually. Sorry for getting off topic, but
Okay.
you know that big ass like monster truck with all the speakers in the front?
Yeah. What about
That
it?
was on sale. You could have bought that off Trade Me. Like that was legitimately on sale.
Nice. Okay. I feel like they would be more land ships. They wouldn't they wouldn't call themselves, like, they would be, what would be the Mongols? No, Mongols. I have a feeling that the only
Mongols is confusing. Let's not talk about
yeah,
it.
Mongols, they would only have exos and bikes. That would be their thing. Like, that's their situation, is more along the lines of every soldier that they had would have some sort of exosuit, or maybe their exosuit is literally their bike. I don't know. Mongols are weird. I have a feeling that China's
I don't know. Mongols are weird. They're just Mongols.
but yeah, like China's the dynasty lords would be this giant mech that are not meant to be traveled around, but they're meant to be this local hub. They're meant to be a local hub of certain, like, areas. So they were built to travel through China, being like a mobile city almost. Maybe they're a skyscraper high, and they're like the biggest mechs, and they were piloted maybe by like 3 or 4 dudes that were just pulling cranks and such.
Hey, you wanna play? 'Cause I'm currently
And at a certain point,
Free
the dynasty
Okay, let me load
lords.
it up quickly. I just also gotta save this.
Cool.
Save.
I have a feeling that the dynasty lords, or the Chinese like lord style mechs, I have a feeling that those would be more shorter, but the first ever lord mechs would be these now still like fortified sections of the Chinese wall, and at that point they would have been designated as titans. Like, they lost the lord mechs status and gained the status of titan mechs. No one makes titan mechs because of how expensive they are, and the Chinese realized that and said, okay, we're going to use you as a fortification
You got beer?
in a city. And so China itself would probably be China itself would have all the inland areas.
Walk past your world pairing, so.
I just thought about something. I have a feeling that
Look at my stream in background footage.
I'll watch it later. I have a feeling that China itself would more likely, if there's still going to be this warring states period, their wars would more likely be on the wall itself. Like, the wall of China would more likely gotten bigger, or at least wider, on top of it, so that they could have battles on top of it. But if Mongols were to ever attack, each section of the wall itself would have certain areas where they know.
Each section of the wall can just independently move by itself. It's like its own vehicle.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that would be more along the lines of the Titans, the Dynasty Titans. And each dynasty, each quote-unquote dynasty had their own Titan, and that's what made, like, they were considered lords. Each dynasty had their own Lord Mech, and the Lord Mech later became the Dynasty Titans. Reason being is because that's what made the Wall of China itself, is that each of these Titans would have sat down, become immobile, and become the wall. And that's, like, instead of this, like, long wall like we have today, we'd have these giant, more, like, pillared walls, where we have each of these Titans would have now become a city. They could move, but they've gone out of action. They've not wanted to move them in hundreds, maybe thousands of years, and their fighting would be this giant highway that they have in between the legs of each Titan. As maybe each Titan literally just kept standing, like, shoulder to shoulder, and the roads below them became the wall, rose up and became the main highway of the areas. And that's where most of the fighting goes on. And most of the, like, civilians would have gone on to their little balconies and looked down inwards, like, watching. That kind of situation, where each of these fights is more honored. They're more, we're going to fight and see, it's more like a game to them. Like, the only times they ever have to really worry about death is whenever Mongol raids, and they try and take out a section of the wall. And, like, each of the legs might be a tower for,
dude,
like,
my guy literally looks like the oldest dwarf.
Like, oh, no, each of the legs for the Titans, no, it would be more along the lines of the shoulders of the Titans would be rolled because they're sitting down.
The whitest white beard.
Yeah, so
pretty sure I'm wearing the Russian hat.
Yeah.
So the way I see it is that each of the Titan, the Lord, or the Dynasty Titans would have gone and interlocked their arms together, and that's, the arms themselves would have been the roads. They would have been kneeling down on the ground, making about the same height of the wall. I'll join here shortly. I want to finish my rant.
Dance with the Russian beard.
But their Titans would have interlocked arms, and that's where the top of the wall would have been. Is that as they went dormant, is that these heads themselves have become this kind of dynasty house, as they've kind of slowly been turned away and towards looking down at them, and they've been revamped to be more along this, like, giant fortress on top of the wall. And that's what they're always fighting over, is, hey, I want to see if I can't take that fortress head. And that's what they're called, and that's what they fight over. But it's these giant Titans that make the same, like, almost the same size of the giant wall, just slightly wider. And that would be the top of the wall would be literally the arms interlocking themselves.
Sleep lovers.
Did it give you a buzz or something?
And the Lord mechs would have just gotten smaller and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Anything else for? Hey, anything I'm forgetting?
I'm dead.
Oh. Hey, how do you think world economics would work in this world?
You just got a massive gold trading system, and that's about it.
Well, food, iron. Okay, so the basic.
I think most like city-states would be independent, but there would be like the more like advanced components like weaponry and like really high-tech and stuff, like the
yeah, like how
like
we're
the
saying
real high-tech
with iron.
Titan stuff. They've got to like order them from like the city factory states.
Okay, the way I see it is that the household.
Your hard hat is broken for me. Is that supposed to be normal?
I have a feeling that if a person were to be nominated to a noble status, they would have been brought into the capital city, and they would have been specifically taught, and they would have they would have been taught how to make their own mech, and that was a secret that they would pass throughout their generations. and that's how they kept their mech running, and that's how that stuff happens. That each noble house would have had to keep up with their own mech, and each of them are all this, like, they all had to follow the same kind of like basic blueprint, and that's why you have like the pilgrim style and all that kind of styles. But each of them are like separately designed, and they're always using the same kind of blueprint. So you have the pilgrim style, which is using this basic blueprint with the different houses adding a little bit to it. Say like they say you have a pilgrim warden that specifically uses like long swords, while another one uses like a poleaxe. They would design it to specifically use those weapons and or have those weapons made. Maybe even like one of the wardens would be more like a four-legged design. That'd be more along the lines of they
Turtle.
want to go as fast as they can. No,
It's a turtle.
no, centaur. That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Maybe even each, like, maybe a warden would be called something to follow up their, like, house. Like, let's go along with a centaur. Like, say that was literally what they wanted to call their knight, or their warden mech, is that they went, okay, we're the pilgrim warden centaur. And that's they're specifically naming it because that's what they wanted it to look like. That's what they did. While you have other people just calling it something else and that stuff, and that would be the that would be their personalized name for that mech house or that house's mech. Is that I'm going to son, I'm giving you centaur. Or like Minotaur would be another one. That would be, and maybe that's an axe-wielding one that has this bull-headed shape, but it's using a pilgrim style framework. Like,
Okay.
the pilgrim is the framework, while the knight, warden, and lord is like the height and armament, like the armors. While wardens,
You can get on top.
like, wardens are allowed this amount of armor and this amount of resources to make it. Maybe you call it the Minotaur because you've decided
Ooh,
to armor certain sections more than the other. Maybe you, like...
Get a zip line up there.
That's the way I see it, is that it's kind of like a leveling system. Is that Warden's the lowest level that you can have, is probably the least amount of armor, but against the other Wardens, you can still ask, like, hey, can I get slightly more armor than I need? Or, like, you can allocate where you want your armor, while maybe a knight gets slightly more advanced things, but they're all the same framework. So that if someone were to lose their life and give it off to a lower noble, say, hey, I'm handing over my right because I died and I need to give it to someone else and I don't have an heir. Maybe they give it to a lower noble. So now they have two mechs. Instead, the way it would work is maybe a noble house is dying off. And so they take
Where'd you go?
Further in, and it just got picked up. No, don't drop me.
Anyways,
That's a lot of pucks. Let me go, you asshole.
but I'm feeling that the secrets of
Jeez,
making
that is a lot of bugs.
So I'm feeling that
We didn't go backwards because there was something I was mining and then I just.
yeah, get yoinked.
No, I literally got yoinks.
Hey Titan, correct me if I'm wrong. So the framework itself would be given to the area in each nobleman, but the specific like knight, warden, lord would be specifically given by the king to the nobleman. Say you have a lower noble, they would be given like, oh hey, here's the basic framework for the pilgrim knight, or here's the basic framework for the temple knight. That would be what they were given. That's the kind of style they're given. America would have a lot of different ones, as I have a feeling that if a nobleman or a peasant was granted nobility, they would literally go to the king and they would have been asked which style of knight. Like, where are you sitting? Like, where are you living? This would be what framework you were given. Make sense, Titan?
Kind of.
Okay, make sure. like, say a person, yeah, so it's along the lines of if they were granted nobility up to like a warden, they would be given the program warden framework, and then they would be able to name it based off what, like, that would be their specific name. So you'd have, oh, that's Achilles, like, or hey, there's Minotaur, or hey, there's Centaur, and you'd know by looking off of them. So Centaur might be specifically literally looking like a centaur and having 2 feet, using the same core, using the same energy source.
You made it look like 2 feet.
Anyways, was there anything I missed that I need to say in this recording that we said beforehand?
Stop making it move.
I'm not.
Stop.
General tech level, how it's like modern day tech, there's internet, stuff like that.
Yeah. Like,
Said all that.
peasants, I have not said that. Peasants would be less worried about dying, because like we stated before recording this, future me, peasants themselves would be more likely, no, he's slow. Trying to think of what I was thinking of. Brain fart, love it, brain fart. Dang, can't remember what the song about. Yeah, peasants would have this raffle, and each nobleman would have to be worried about their own civilian. And if you were, like, say there had been a war a week ago, if you're in that war, you would not be the one drafted for the new war that's happening now. You would be drafted for the next war. That kind of situation. And each noble house